Commander Zethkar sat in the small white room, his 4 arms chained to the metal table. His blue skin showed dark scars from the battle that had changed everything. The room was cold and bright, like everything else on this human ship. Hear the quiet hum of the engines through the walls. The door opened with a soft hiss. A human female walked in carrying a small device and a cup of something that smelled warm. She was smaller than most humans he had seen, with short brown hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform was clean and pressed, with silver bars on her collar. "I'm Captain Lisa Morgan," she said, sitting down across from Lee. "Him." Her voice was calm and steady. "You are Commander Zethkar of the Vorthok Empire, is that correct?" Zethkar nodded slowly. He had been expecting this moment for 3 days now, ever since the human ship had picked up his escape pod. Pod had been drifting in space for almost a week after his command ship was destroyed. He was the only survivor from a crew of 800. "Good," Captain Morgan said. She placed the cup on the table between them. Steam rose from the dark liquid inside. "This is coffee. It will help you stay awake. We have much to discuss." The alien commander looked at the cup but did not touch it. He had heard about human drinks. Some were poison to his kind. Others were said to change how you think. He did not trust anything the humans offered. "You do not want to drink it," Captain Morgan said. "It was not a question. That is wise. Your medical files show that caffeine could make you very sick." She pulled the cup back toward herself and took a small sip. "I apologize. I forgot that not all species can drink the same things." This surprised Zethkar. In all his years fighting other species, no enemy had ever cared about what he could or could not eat or drink. Most would have laughed if he got sick from their food. But this human seemed genuinely sorry for the mistake. "Why am I here?" he asked. His voice came out as a low growl through his translator device. "Because you were at the Battle of Kaplorifor for 2B, Captain Morgan replied. "Because you commanded the 3rd attack wave against New Denver. Because you saw things that your leaders need to understand." Zethkar felt his chest tighten. The Battle of Kepler-4 for 2B. Even thinking about it made his hands shake. It had been supposed to be easy, a simple conquest of a weak human world. The intelligence reports had been very clear about that. "The humans of New Denver were supposed to surrender quickly," he said slowly. "Your people had only been in space for 50 years. Your weapons were old. Your ships were slow. Our computers said the battle would last 3 days at most." Captain Morgan nodded. "What did your computers tell you about human military history? That you fought among yourselves for thousands of years," Zethkar answered. "That you used primitive weapons like metal bullets and chemical explosives. That your largest wars killed millions of your own people." He paused, remembering the briefings. "We thought this made you weak. We thought it meant you did not know how to fight a real war." "A real war," Captain Morgan repeated. "What is a real war to the Vorthok Empire?" Zethkar straightened in his chair, as much as the chains would allow. This was something he understood, something he had been trained for. Since he was young, a real war follows the codes of military honor, he said. 2 fleets meet in open space. They fight ship to ship, weapon to weapon, until one side surrenders or is destroyed. The losing side accepts defeat with dignity. The winning side treats prisoners with respect. Civilians are not harmed. Supply lines are protected by law. Medical ships are never attacked. He looked directly at Captain Morgan. "These are the laws that all civilized species follow. For 3,000 years, every war in our galaxy has been fought this way. Keeps conflicts short and prevents unnecessary death." Captain Morgan was quiet for a long moment. She seemed to be thinking about his words very carefully. "Those are good laws," she said finally. "They would prevent a lot of suffering. But tell me, Commander Zethkar, what happens when one side does not follow these laws?" The question confused him. All sides follow the laws. That is what makes them civilized. "What if they do not?" Captain Morgan pressed. "What if one side decides that victory is more important than honor? What if they decide that any tactic is acceptable if it helps them win?" Zethkar felt uncomfortable. This was not how war worked. This was not how civilized beings behaved. "Would be chaos," he said. "That would be madness. No civilized species would ever fight that way." Captain Morgan smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that made Zethkar's skin crawl. "Commander," she said quietly. Humans are not civilized. The words hit him like a physical blow. He had suspected this, but hearing it said out loud was different. It made everything that had happened at Kepler 44 to make terrible sense. Admiral Corthavel brought 200 ships to New Denver, Captain Morgan continued. He expected to fight our orbital defense platforms. He expected our ships to meet him in formation, expected us to follow your laws of war. Zethkar nodded. That was exactly what Admiral Corthavel had expected. The plan had been simple and elegant. The Vorthok fleet would jump into the system, destroy the human defense platforms, and demand surrender. If the humans refused, the fleet would destroy their ships one by one until they gave up. It was how every conquest had worked for centuries. Instead, Captain Morgan said, "You found something else entirely." The alien commander closed his eyes, trying to forget what he had seen. But the memories would not go away. They never went away. The first sign that something was wrong came when we dropped out of faster-than-light travel, he said. Our sensors showed the expected number of human ships, but they were not in formation. They were scattered all over the system, hiding behind asteroids and moons. Some were drifting without power, like they were broken. And what did Admiral Corthavel do? He laughed. Zethkar said bitterly. He said the humans were so afraid that they could not even form a proper battle line. He ordered the fleet to advance and destroy them one by one. Captain Morgan leaned forward slightly, but they were not broken, were they? No, Zethkar whispered. They were not broken. They were waiting. He opened his eyes and looked at the human captain. She was watching him with those dark eyes that seemed to understand everything. The first attack came from what we thought was a dead freighter, he continued. It had been drifting near an asteroid for what looked like days. No heat signature, no energy readings, nothing. But when our lead destroyer got close, the freighter suddenly came alive. Weapons ports opened all along its hull. It was not a freighter at all. What was it? A trap, Zethkar said. The whole thing was a trap. The freighter destroyed the destroyer with a single salvo, then used its engines to crash into a second ship. Both vessels were completely destroyed. Captain Morgan nodded. That was when you realized that humans do not fight fair. Zethkar repeated the word like it tasted bad. There is nothing fair about pretending you're warships or cargo vessels. There's nothing fair about hiding your military strength. There's nothing fair about sacrificing your own ships just to damage the enemy. No, Captain Morgan agreed. There is not, but it is effective. Zethkar felt anger rising in his chest. It is barbaric. It goes against everything that separates civilized beings from animals. Commander Captain Morgan said gently, You came to our world to conquer us, came to take our homes, our freedom, and our lives. Did you expect us to make it easy for you? The question hung in the air between them. Zethkar had no answer for it. Captain Morgan set down her coffee cup and looked at Zethkar with those dark human eyes. The alien commander shifted in his chains, still thinking about her last question. He had no good answer for why the humans should make conquest easy for their enemies. Tell me about Lieutenant Jake Murphy, Captain Morgan said quietly. Zethkar's skin turned a darker shade of blue. That name brought back memories he tried hard to forget. Jake Murphy had been the human pilot who taught the Vorthok Empire that humans could be patient in ways that seemed impossible. How do you know that name? Zethkar asked. Lieutenant Murphy filed a report after the battle, Captain Morgan replied, but I want to hear your version of what happened. The alien commander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It was the second day of the battle, he began. Admiral Corthavel had ordered all supply convoys to move in tight formation with heavy escort. The humans had already destroyed 3 cargo ships, and we could not afford to lose more ammunition and fuel. He paused, remembering the confidence they had all felt. Human attacks had been annoying, but not dangerous enough to change their overall strategy. I was commanding the escort for supply convoy Delta 7, Zethkar continued. 12 cargo ships carrying plasma charges and reactor fuel. 6 destroyers as guards. We were following a safe route through the outer system, away from the main battle. Captain Morgan nodded but said nothing. She seemed to understand that this story needed to be told in its own time. The route took us through an asteroid field, Zethkar said. Nothing unusual about that.
asteroid fields are common in star systems.
Our sensors showed nothing but rocks and ice. Some pieces of old metal from mining operations, dead satellites, the usual debris you find in space. He closed his 4 eyes, but the memories were still there behind his eyelids. We were halfway through the field when the attack came. It did not come from outside the convoy. It came from inside. Inside? Captain Morgan asked. One of the pieces of debris suddenly came alive, Zethkar said. It was a human fighter craft, but it had been disguised to look like a broken piece of mining equipment. It had been floating there for hours, maybe days. No engine heat, no energy signature, nothing to show it was alive. Captain Morgan leaned forward slightly. How long had Lieutenant Murphy been waiting? Our analysis after the battle showed that his fighter had been in position for at least 6 hours, Zethkar replied. 6 hours of floating in space like a dead rock. His life. Support systems were running at minimum power. His pilot must have been barely conscious from the cold and lack of oxygen. The alien commander shook his head in disbelief, even now. No Vorthok pilot would do such a thing, he said. To wait motionless in space for 6 hours, barely alive, just for the chance to attack a supply convoy. It is madness. But it worked. Captain Morgan pointed out. Yes, Zethkar admitted bitterly. It worked perfectly. He took a deep breath and continued his story. The human fighter activated its engines when it was already inside our formation. Murphy destroyed 2 cargo ships before we even knew we were under attack. Then he used the explosion from the second ship to hide his escape vector. Where did he go? That was the worst part, Zethkar said. He did not try to escape. Instead, he flew deeper into the convoy formation. He was using our own ships as cover, moving between them so we could not get a clear shot at him. Captain Morgan smiled slightly. Lieutenant Murphy always was creative with his tactics. Creative. Zethkar repeated the word like it was a curse. He destroyed 4 more cargo ships by ramming them with his fighter. 6 ships total, plus his own fighter. He killed himself just to damage our supplies. Did it work? The convoy lost half its cargo, Zethkar said. The battle group that was supposed to receive those supplies had to retreat from their attack position. 3 of our capital ships were left without enough ammunition to continue fighting. He looked directly at Captain Morgan. 1 human pilot in 1 small fighter changed the outcome of an entire battle by sacrificing his own life. That is not how war is supposed to work. How is war supposed to work? Captain Morgan asked. Zethkar straightened in his chair again. This was something he had been trained to understand since he was young. Pilots are valuable, he said. It takes years to train a good pilot, decades to train a great one. You do not waste such valuable resources on suicide attacks. You preserve your experienced warriors so they can fight again. But Lieutenant Murphy's attack saved hundreds of human lives, Captain Morgan pointed out. By stopping that battle, groups advance. He prevented them from attacking civilian areas. That is not the point, Zethkar said, frustrated. The point is that no civilized species throws away trained personnel like that. Treat your soldiers like they are disposable. Captain Morgan was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was very soft. Commander, can I tell you something? About Lieutenant Murphy? Zethkar nodded. He volunteered for that mission, she said. When our commanders explained the plan, they asked for volunteers. 12 pilots stepped forward. Murphy was chosen because he was the best at low-power flying. He had practiced floating motionless in space for hours at a time. The alien commander felt confused. He volunteered to die? He volunteered to complete the mission, Captain Morgan corrected. The mission required someone to wait in space for hours, attack a superior force, and probably not survive. Murphy knew the risks. He accepted them because the mission was important. Zethkar shook his head. That makes no sense. Why would anyone volunteer for a mission like that? Because Lieutenant Murphy had a family on New Denver, Captain Morgan replied. A wife and 2 young children. He knew that if the Vorthok supply convoys got through, your forces would have enough ammunition to bombard the civilian areas where his family lived. The words hit Zethkar like a physical blow. He had not thought about the human pilot having a family. In Vorthok culture, family members of military personnel were kept safe on distant worlds, far from any fighting. His family was on the planet being attacked? Zethkar asked. Most human military families live on the worlds they are defending, Captain Morgan said. When you attack our colonies, you are attacking our homes. When you threaten our cities, you are threatening our children? Zethkar felt something cold in his stomach. This changed everything about how he understood the battle. So when Murphy attacked our convoy, he said slowly, he was not just following orders, he was protecting his own family. Yes, Captain Morgan said simply. The alien commander sat in silence for a long time thinking about this. In every Vorthok war he had fought, the enemy soldiers were professional warriors fighting for their government or their empire. They fought for duty or honor or conquest, but these humans were fighting for their own families, their own homes, their own children. That explains why you fight so hard, he said finally. But it does not explain why you fight so strangely. Captain Morgan raised an eyebrow. Strangely. Murphy could have attacked our convoy in a normal way, Zethkar said. He could have come at us head-on with his weapons firing. He would have been destroyed quickly, but he would have died with honor, following proper military tactics. And he would have accomplished nothing, Captain Morgan pointed out. A single fighter attacking 12 ships and 6 destroyers head-on would be destroyed before it could fire more than a few shots. But he would have died honorably, Zethkar insisted. And Captain Morgan said gently, Lieutenant Murphy was not trying to die honorably. He was trying to save his family. Honor does not matter to a dead man's children. Zethkar felt his world shifting again. Everything he had been taught about warfare, about honor, about proper military conduct, seemed meaningless when faced with an enemy that cared more about results than rules. So humans do not care about military honor? He asked. We care about winning, Captain Morgan replied. We care about protecting the people we love. If that means breaking your rules of war, then we break your rules. The alien commander looked down at his chained hands. They were shaking slightly. There were other attacks like Murphy's, he said quietly. Yes, Captain Morgan said. There were. Captain Morgan refilled her coffee cup from a small pot she had brought into the room. The hot liquid steamed in the cold air. Zethkar watched her careful movements, still trying to understand these strange creatures called humans. The ground invasion, Captain Morgan said, settling back into her chair. Zethkar's skin went pale blue. If the space battle had been confusing, the ground war had been pure nightmare. He had commanded ground forces before on 6 different worlds. All of those invasions had followed the same pattern. And troops, secure key positions, wait for the enemy to surrender. Simple and clean. New Denver had been different. Admiral Korthovel ordered the ground invasion after 3 days of space fighting. Zethkar began. The human fleet was still fighting, but they had lost many ships. The admiral thought it would be easier to take the planet directly rather than destroy every human ship in space. He paused, remembering the confidence they had all felt. Ground invasions were supposed to be the easy part of any conquest. I was given command of the 5th Landing Force, he continued. 3,000 soldiers, 50 assault vehicles, full air support. Our target was the human city they called New Denver. Population about 2 million. Captain Morgan nodded. Did your intelligence reports tell you about the city's defenses? Standard planetary defense grid, Zethkar replied. Some military bases around the city. A few thousand human soldiers. Normal civilian infrastructure. Our computers predicted the city would surrender within 12 hours of landing, but it did not. No, Zethkar said quietly. It did not. He closed his eyes and tried to organize. His memories? The ground war had been so chaotic, so unlike anything in his training that even now he had trouble understanding what had happened. The first sign of trouble came during the landing, he said. Our dropships were supposed to land at the main spaceport outside the city. It was a large flat area perfect for military operations. But when we approached, the landing pads exploded. Captain Morgan raised an eyebrow. Exploded. The humans had placed bombs under their own spaceport, Zethkar explained. They destroyed their own landing facility rather than let us use it. Our dropships had to land in open fields several kilometers from the city. He opened his eyes and looked at Captain Morgan. What kind of people destroy their own infrastructure? he asked. That spaceport was worth millions of credits. It was needed for trade and transportation. But the humans blew it up without hesitation. People who would rather fight in the mud than make things easy for their enemies, Captain Morgan replied. Zethkar shook his head. It made no military sense. Destroying the spaceport did not stop our invasion. It just forced us to walk a few extra kilometers. Did it? Captain Morgan asked. Did it really make no difference? The alien commander thought about this. Well, it did slow us down, and it meant our supply ships could not land easily. But those were minor problems, were they? Zethkar felt uncomfortable. He was starting to realize that what had seemed like minor problems at the time had actually been part of a larger plan. The march to the city was when things got really strange. He continued. The road from our landing site to New Denver was a simple highway, straight, well-maintained, easy to follow. Perfect for moving our vehicles quickly, but every few kilometers, the road was blocked. No? Sometimes by crashed vehicles, sometimes by fallen trees, sometimes by piles of concrete and metal. Each time, we had to stop and clear the obstacle. Captain Morgan sipped her coffee. How long did it take to clear each obstacle? Usually about 30 minutes, Zethkar said. Sometimes an hour if the blockage was large. It was annoying but not dangerous. So a 3-hour march became how long Zethkar did the math in his head. About 8 hours. But we still reached the city. The obstacles did not stop us, no, Captain Morgan agreed. But they gave the humans 8 hours to prepare for your arrival instead of 3. And they tired out your soldiers before the real fighting even began. The alien commander felt that cold feeling in his stomach again. These humans planned everything so carefully. Even their obstacles had multiple purposes. When we finally reached the city outskirts, we expected to see military fortifications, Zethkar said. Defensive walls, weapon positions, soldiers in uniform. Instead, we saw normal city buildings. Houses, shops, schools. It looked like a regular civilian area. Where were the soldiers? That was the problem, Zethkar said, his voice rising. Slightly, we could not tell where the soldiers were. Some of the humans we saw looked like civilians. Others looked like they might be military. But they were not wearing proper uniforms. They were not carrying military weapons openly. He leaned forward as much as his chains would allow. In a proper war, soldiers wear uniforms so you can tell them apart from civilians. Civilians stay in safe areas away from the fighting. Keeps everyone clear about who is a combatant and who is not. Captain Morgan nodded. That is how most species fight, but not humans, Zethkar said bitterly. When we entered the first neighborhood, we were attacked by what looked like a group of shopkeepers. They came out of a store selling children's toys, carrying military-grade weapons. What did you do? We fought back, of course. But after we defeated them, we found that the toy store was connected by tunnels to 3 other buildings. The humans had been moving through their own city using hidden passages. Zethkar's voice was becoming more agitated as he remembered. Then we were attacked from a school building. A school where children learn, but the humans were using it. As a military position, were there children in the school? Captain Morgan asked quietly. No, Zethkar admitted. The building was empty of civilians. But using a school as a fortress is wrong. It violates the basic rules of civilized warfare. Captain Morgan was quiet for a moment. Commander, if someone was invading your homeworld, would you not use every building available to defend it? We would use proper military facilities, Zethkar insisted. We would keep civilian areas separate from military operations, even if it meant losing the war. The question hung in the air. Zethkar had no good answer. The worst part was not knowing who was a soldier and who was not, he continued. A human female approached our position, carrying what looked like medical supplies. Medical personnel are protected under the laws of war. We let her pass, and she was carrying explosives, disguised as medical equipment. She destroyed one of our vehicles and killed 6 of my soldiers. Captain Morgan's face remained calm, but Zethkar thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. But then, an hour later, a different human medic approached our position, also carrying medical supplies. This time, we were suspicious. We searched. her equipment thoroughly. What did you find? Real medical supplies, Zethkar said. She was actually trying to help wounded civilians. But because of the first attack, we treated her like an enemy. She was terrified. He looked down at his hands. How are we supposed to tell the difference? How can we follow the laws of war when the enemy does not wear uniforms, does not stay in military areas, and mixes real medical personnel with fake ones? You cannot, Captain Morgan said simply. That is the point. Zethkar felt anger rising in his chest. So humans deliberately make war more confusing and dangerous for everyone? Make war more costly for invaders, Captain Morgan replied. If you cannot tell our soldiers from our civilians, then you have to treat every human as a potential threat. That slows you down, wears out your troops, and makes your soldiers nervous and afraid. It also puts your own civilians in danger, Zethkar pointed out. Yes, Captain Morgan admitted, it does. But our civilians understand the risks. They choose to help defend their homes even though it puts them in danger. The alien commander shook his head in disbelief. On my world, civilians expect the military to protect them, he said. They do not expect to fight for themselves. Our worlds, everyone fights when their homes are threatened, Captain Morgan replied. Military, civilians, young, old, we do not have the luxury of leaving war to the professionals. But why? Zethkar asked. Why make war so complicated and dangerous? Captain Morgan leaned forward slightly. Because, Commander, we learned long ago that if you make conquest too expensive, most enemies will decide it is not worth the cost. Captain Morgan finished her coffee and set the empty cup aside. The room felt colder now, or maybe it was just the memories that Zethkar was sharing. The alien commander's blue skin had taken on an almost gray color as he spoke about the ground. War. Tell me about when you realized the humans were not trying to win, Captain Morgan said quietly. Zethkar looked up sharply. His 4 eyes focused on her face with an intensity that made her sit back slightly. How did you know? He asked. Because I have read the reports from both sides, Captain Morgan replied. Our commanders were very clear about their objectives. They were not trying to defeat your army in a traditional sense. The alien commander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It was Captain Elena Rodriguez who made me understand, he said. He was leading a squadron of human fighters in what we thought was their final attack. 24 human ships against our command dreadnought and its escorts. It looked like a desperate suicide charge. He paused, remembering the moment when everything had changed. Rodriguez came straight at our flagship, broadcasting on all frequencies. She was playing human music very loudly, something with heavy drums and electric guitars. Her fighters were in a tight formation, flying directly into our heaviest weapons. Captain Morgan nodded. What happened? We destroyed them, Zethkar said simply. All 24 ships. Rodriguez died when her fighter crashed into our outer shields. It seemed like a pointless waste of life and equipment, but it was not. Pointless, no, Zethkar admitted. While we were focused on Rodriguez's attack, human boarding parties had been attaching themselves to our supply ships. Small groups of soldiers in spacesuits, moving without engines, using magnetic grapples to reach our hulls. He shook his head in amazement. They had been drifting in space for hours, waiting for the right moment. When Rodriguez began her attack, the boarding parties cut through our ship hulls and planted explosives inside our ammunition storage areas. How many ships did you lose? 6 supply vessels and 2 escorts, Zethkar replied. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was realizing that Rodriguez knew she was going to die. She knew her attack would fail. She did it anyway, just to give the boarding parties a few extra minutes. Captain Morgan was quiet, letting him continue. After the space battle, I was reassigned to ground command, Zethkar said. The fighting in New Denver was getting worse every day. We controlled most of the main streets, but the humans kept attacking from unexpected directions. He closed his eyes, remembering the urban nightmare. That was when I met Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks. He was leading what our intelligence said was the human command center for the entire city defense. Where was this command center? In a children's hospital, Zethkar said, his voice filled with disgust. The humans were using a medical facility for military operations. When we surrounded the building, Brooks came out under a white flag to negotiate. Captain Morgan raised an eyebrow. He wanted to surrender. That is what we thought, Zethkar said. Brooks said he wanted to discuss terms for evacuating wounded civilians from the hospital. He seemed reasonable, professional. He spoke our language well and understood military protocol. But while he was talking to our commanders, his soldiers were evacuating through underground tunnels. The entire conversation was a distraction. When we finally entered the hospital, it was empty, except for real patients and medical staff. Zethkar opened his eyes and looked at Captain Morgan. Brooks had used our own sense of honor against us. He knew we would respect a flag of truce. He knew we would listen to requests about civilian safety. He used our civilization against us. Did you capture him? No, Zethkar said bitterly. While we were searching the empty hospital, Brooks and his unit attacked our main supply depot. From behind, they had moved through the city's sewer system and came up inside our own secure perimeter. The alien commander's voice was becoming more agitated. They destroyed 3 months' worth of ammunition and food supplies. Then they disappeared back into the sewers before we could respond. Brooks had never intended to surrender. The whole negotiation was just another attack. Captain Morgan nodded slowly. And that was when you realized what the humans were really doing. Yes, Zethkar said. They were not trying to defeat our army. We're trying to make victory impossible. He leaned forward. As much as his chains would allow, every attack cost us more resources than it cost them. Every day we stayed on their planet, we used up supplies that could not be easily replaced. Every soldier we lost was experienced and trained. Every soldier they lost was quickly replaced by a civilian with a weapon. How many civilians joined the fighting? We estimated that about 40% of the city's population was actively helping the resistance, Zethkar replied. Not all of them were carrying weapons, but they were providing information, supplies, hiding places, medical care. He shook his head in disbelief. On any civilized world, civilians stay out of military conflicts. They let the professional soldiers fight while they go about their normal lives. But these humans turn their entire society into a weapon. Captain Morgan was quiet for a moment. What did General Patricia Hayes tell you when you met her? Zethkar's skin went completely pale. The mention of that name brought back the worst memory of the entire war. How do you know about General Hayes? He asked. She sent a message to your fleet commanders, Captain Morgan replied. But I want to hear what she said to you personally. The alien commander was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking. General Hayes contacted me directly on the 3rd week of the ground fighting, he said. She used our own communication systems to reach my personal command frequency. She knew my name, my rank, my family status, back on the homeworld. Did she say? She said that the humans had been studying us during the fighting, Zethkar replied. Learning our tactics, our technology, our culture. She said they now knew everything they needed to know about the Vorthok Empire. He looked directly at Captain Morgan. Then she made me an offer. She said that if we withdrew from their system immediately, they would let us leave in peace. But if we continued the invasion, they would make sure that every human world fought exactly the same way. And if you won on New Denver? She said that winning would not matter, Zethkar whispered. She said that humans had colonies in 47 star systems. She said that if we conquered New Denver, the other 46 worlds would be ready for us. Captain Morgan nodded. What else did she say? She said that humans had been fighting wars against each other for thousands of years. That they had learned every possible way to make war expensive and horrible. She said that if the Vorthok Empire wanted to conquer human space, they would have to do it planet by planet, city by city, building by building. Zethkar's voice was barely audible now. She said that by the time we conquered the last human world, the Vorthok Empire would be so weakened that any other species could defeat us easily. She said that attacking humanity would destroy us even if we won. Did you believe her at first? No, Zethkar said. But then she showed me something that changed my mind. What? Videos from other human colonies? Zethkar replied. Places that had heard about our invasion of New Denver. They were all preparing the same defenses, destroying their own infrastructure, training civilians to fight, stockpiling weapons in schools and hospitals. He looked up at Captain Morgan with haunted eyes. She was not threatening us. She was warning us. She was telling us exactly what would happen if we continued the war. What did you decide? I recommended immediate withdrawal to Admiral Korthovel, Zethkar said. I told him that victory was impossible. Not because we could not defeat the humans, but because defeating them would cost more than losing to them. Captain Morgan leaned back in her chair. And that is why you asked to remain as our prisoner, rather than return to your own people, Zethkar said quietly, because I understand now what humans really are. Captain Morgan stood up and walked to the small window in the interrogation room. Through the thick glass, she could see the stars moving slowly past as the ship traveled through space. Zethkar watched her, wondering what she was thinking about.
Tell
me about the withdrawal, she said without turning around. Zethkar felt his chest tighten. The withdrawal had been almost as bad as the fighting itself, maybe worse, because by then he had understood what the humans really were. Admiral Korthovel did not want to believe my report, he began. He said that no civilized species would fight the way I described. He said I was letting fear cloud my judgment. Captain Morgan turned back to face him, but he did order the withdrawal. Not at first, Zethkar said. The Admiral wanted to try one more major assault. He brought in reinforcements from 2 other battle groups, fresh ships, fresh troops, better weapons. What changed his mind? Zethkar was quiet for a moment, remembering that final conversation with his commander. Commander Bruce Anderson changed his mind, he said finally. Captain Morgan raised an eyebrow. Bruce Anderson? I do not know that name. He was the human commander who contacted Admiral Korthovel directly, Zethkar explained. Anderson sent a message to our flagship using one of our own communication codes. What do you get your codes? That was what terrified the Admiral. Zethkar said Anderson did not just have our communication codes. He had detailed information about our ship designs, our weapon systems, our military organization. He knew things that only high-ranking Vorthok officers should know. Captain Morgan sat back down looking interested. What kind of things? Anderson knew the Admiral's full name, his service record, the names of his family members back on the home world. He knew how many ships we had, what weapons they carried, how much ammunition we had left. Zethkar shook his head in disbelief. But worst of all, Anderson knew about our other military operations. He mentioned battles we were fighting in completely different star systems, places that had nothing to do with the human colonies. How was that possible? We never found out, Zethkar admitted. But Anderson made it clear that humans had been watching us for much longer than we had been watching them. He said they had been studying the Vorthok Empire for years, learning everything they could about how we fight. Captain Morgan nodded slowly. What did Anderson want? He offered a safe passage out of the human system, Zethkar said. No attacks on our ships during withdrawal. No pursuit once we left their space. Complete amnesty for all Vorthok forces. Exchange for what? Nothing, Zethkar said, his voice filled with confusion. That was what made it so frightening. Anderson asked for nothing in return. He just wanted us to leave. Captain Morgan smiled slightly. That scared Admiral Korthovel more than any threat would have. Yes, Zethkar said, if Anderson had demanded tribute, or territory, or anything else, we would have understood. That is how normal negotiations work. But he asked for nothing except our departure. The alien commander leaned forward. Anderson said that humans did not want to destroy our fleet. He said they did not want to kill our soldiers. He said they just wanted us to go home and never come back. Did the Admiral believe him? The Admiral was afraid not to believe him, Zethkar replied. Anderson had proven that humans knew far more about us than we knew about them. If they could get our communication codes and our intelligence reports, what else could they do? Captain Morgan was quiet, letting him continue. But the most terrifying part of Anderson's message came at the end, Zethkar said. He told us exactly what would happen if we did not accept his offer, which was, he said that humans would share everything they had learned about Vorthok military tactics with every other species in the galaxy, Zethkar replied. Our enemies, our rivals, even species we had never contacted. Everyone would know our weaknesses. The alien commander's voice became very quiet. Anderson said that humans had detailed records of every battle we had fought in their system. Every mistake we had made, every weakness we had shown, every tactic that had failed. He said they would give all of this information away for free. Captain Morgan nodded. And then your other enemies would know exactly how to defeat you. Yes, Zethkar said the Vorthok Empire has many enemies. Species we have conquered, rivals we compete with for resources, neighbors who fear our expansion. If they all knew our military secrets, they could form alliances against us. He looked directly at Captain Morgan. Anderson was not just threatening to defeat our current invasion, he was threatening to end the Vorthok Empire entirely. So Admiral Korthavel ordered the withdrawal. He had no choice, Zethkar said. But even the withdrawal showed us how much the humans knew about us. How so? Anderson provided us with safe routes out of their system, Zethkar explained. Routes that avoided human patrol areas and defense platforms. But the routes he gave us were better than our own navigation charts. Anderson knew more about the local space around their colonies than our own scouts did. Captain Morgan stood up again and walked back to the window. And that is when you decided to stay, she said. Zethkar replied. When my escape pod was damaged during the withdrawal, I could have sent a distress signal to our fleet. I chose not to. Why? The alien commander was quiet for a very long time. When he spoke, his voice was filled with something that might have been fear, or respect, or both. Because I realized that humans are not just another species, he said. They are something completely new in the galaxy. Captain Morgan turned to look at him. Knew how? Every other species we have encountered follows the same basic patterns, Zethkar explained. They develop technology. They build civilizations. They fight wars according to established rules. They are predictable. Shook his head. But humans are different. They do not follow the rules because they do not care about the rules. They only care about results. And that scares you. It should scare everyone, Zethkar said. Humans are what happens when a species learns to fight from necessity instead of tradition. You have been fighting each other for thousands of years, and that has taught you things that no other species knows. Captain Morgan sat back down. What kinds of things? You know that there is no such thing as an acceptable loss if the alternative is extinction, Zethkar said. You know that honor means nothing to a dead civilization. You know that any weapon, any tactic, any sacrifice is justified if it protects your people. He looked at her with all four eyes.
Most species in the galaxy
have never faced a real threat to their existence. They fight limited wars for limited goals, but humans fight like every battle could be their last. Is that a bad thing? It is a terrifying thing, Zethkar replied. Because it means that humans will never stop adapting, never stop learning, never stop finding new ways to win. Captain Morgan was quiet for a moment. What will you tell your people about us? I will tell them the truth, Zethkar said. That humanity is not just another young species that can be conquered or controlled. You are something that could change the entire galaxy. Change it how? By showing every other species that the old ways of fighting do not work anymore. Zethkar said that honor and tradition and civilized warfare are luxuries that only the strongest can afford. He paused, thinking about the implications. If other species start fighting like humans, the galaxy will become a much more dangerous place. But if they do not learn to fight like humans, they will be conquered by species that do.
Captain Morgan
Stood up and gathered her things. The interrogation was ending. Commander Zethkar, she said formally. You will be transferred to a civilian facility where you can request asylum if you choose. You will be treated well. Thank you, Zethkar said. But I have one question. Are humans planning to expand beyond your current territory? Captain Morgan paused at the door. Humans go wherever they choose to go, Commander. But we prefer to explore rather than conquer. And if someone tries to stop you, Captain Morgan smiled, and for the first time, Zethkar saw something in that smile that reminded him of the human fighters who had destroyed his fleet. Then they will learn what the Vorthok Empire learned, she said. That stopping humans is much more expensive than leaving them alone. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. leaving Zethkar alone with his thoughts and his memories of the war that had changed everything he believed about civilization. Honor and the true cost of survival.